We'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carries. We should check. Do we have anybody on Zoom? I didn't know if we had any commissioners on Zoom.
The Kate Rogers, Matt
Also, I was wondering asking about Vice Chair Altman or Commissioner Hovkamp.
Sounds like vice chair is.
So,
Oh, we got a camera.
okay, perfect. All right. The next item is public comment. Does anybody in the public like to speak to items that aren't otherwise on the agenda? Ms. Gould.
Hello, Planning Commissioners. My name is Nunzi Gould. I've lived in our community for 30-some years. And I've actually filed code complaints because that's how you actually attempt to get the county in compliance with their code. It's become apparent to me that that department is underfunded, and land use code complaints are getting put at the bottom of the rung, below the dog bite or the septic overflowing. And my concern is that as land use and new text is being written by your department, that you're made aware of how the county code actually is implemented. And it's actually not implemented always according to the code, and therefore it relies on people such as me or my neighbors to file what used to be called code complaints, which are now called code compliance complaints. So the goal is to get a property into compliance with our code, and that can be very complex. It can involve water, it can involve buildings, it can involve land use. And because of the complexity of land use related code complaints, they take a while, and it isn't quite as easy as euthanize the dog or arrest the person who's beating up on their kid and those other risk related things. But it is relevant to things that you're looking at now on your comprehensive plan and with your code. So I would ask that you carefully evaluate the budget that goes into funding the code enforcement department, as well as funding the improvements for this room, which since it was built has had technical problems. And that was about in the year 2004, as I recall. So thank you for your attention. I don't know if any of you have ever had to file a code enforcement complaint. It's not an easy task to take on. And I do believe that a land use case should not require months upon months upon months to get assigned a case number or to be apportioned to the code enforcement staff. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I would just offer that probably we're not the proper venue to address that is probably the Board of Commissioners, since I don't think it's within our purview. And maybe Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Gould's comments. I would respectfully ask or suggest that Ms. Gould direct those remarks about the Community Development Department's budget, the staffing, how we prioritize code enforcement. Those comments need to be made to the Board of County Commissioners. Ms. Gould has received our current fiscal year 2025 budget for code enforcement. We will certainly send her the draft fiscal year 26 budget once it's prepared for the budget committee. But these types of questions about operations aren't suitable for the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission deals with land use policy. And so I'm respectfully suggesting to Ms. Gould that she can reach out to her elected officials, her county commissioners, and certainly participate in the budget committee hearing for the Community Development Department. That will occur on May 13th. So it's duly noted. The limitations that we have, I'm not going to get into it now. It's just not the right purview as for reasons that I've mentioned. But Ms. Gould and any planning commissioner for that matter, any citizen, if you have your own viewpoints about how any department, let alone the Community Development Department, should be run, should be funded, how it should be structured, those comments need to be expressed to the Board of County Commissioners. So just for appropriate, for everyone's time and direction, but I do recognize Ms. Gould's statements, her experience, but they, at the end, they need to be directed to the Board of County Commissioners and the Budget Committee, who can take due consideration of her interest to have the Community Development Department's Code Enforcement Division more funded more adequately and prioritize cases differently than what we're doing today. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So if I could just follow up, please. We have the Community Development Department, which is the fox that's guarding the hen house. And you guys are writing law. And the question is there parity when somebody knocks on the door saying, hello, please get property A in line with your regulations? If the CDD comes back saying, this is not our priority, where does that leave citizens? And where does that leave the code that you guys have been spending a lot of time to write?
Well, unfortunately, like I say, that as Peter mentioned, it's outside our purview to make those decisions. It's
No, I realize that, but it shouldn't be outside of your awareness.
and we're
Right.
We appreciate your comments.
That's why I bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other citizen comments? As none, we'll move into next action item. Well, with a public hearing on clear and objective housing standard text amendment, Title 17.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. For the record, I'm calling Senior Transportation Planner with the Community Development Department and the Road Department. And I'm just joining as a panelist here, and I'll start with a presentation here. I've given the chair a quick kind of procedural script. So at the end, there'll be some statements that you'll be prompted to make, but I'll go over some of just the hearing procedures initially, and then we'll move into more staff report information there. I'll just share my screen really quick. All right. This is the time and place set for hearing on file number 247-25-000-110-TA concerning amendments establishing clear and objective housing development standards as mandated by House Bill 3197. Staff will outline the hearing procedures that will be followed. The project website and full records available on the web page outlined here on the slide. It's bit.ly/Deschutes Clear and Objective Title 17. The Planning Commission will hear oral testimony, receive written testimony, and consider the testimony submitted at this hearing. The hearing is also being recorded. The Commission may make a decision on this matter today, continue the public hearing to a date certain, or leave the written record open for a specified period of time. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. Staff representing Deschutes County as the applicant will give a brief report on this issue. We will then take testimony from agencies and any interested persons. And then following testimony, the commission can request staff to answer any additional questions. This is a hybrid public hearing with both in-person and remote participation. For our in-person participants, please fill out a blue sign-up sheet and submit to staff. They're on the side of the room there. After your name is called, please come up to one of the tables at the front of the room before beginning your testimony. Before starting your testimony, please provide your first and last name as well as your mailing address. For our remote participants, if you want to testify, you must be logged into Zoom and have called in using the Zoom dial-in option. When the chair asks if anyone would like to testify, you'll need to use the raise hand feature to notify the commission. To do this, you need to press the raise hand button on your computer or smart device, or if you called in, dial *9. In addition to oral testimony, if anyone has written testimony to submit, please hand it to me after your testimony. If you're participating remotely, you can submit your written testimony via email to my address on the screen. It's tariq.rawlings@deschutes.org. The chair and staff are responsible for conducting an orderly hearing. Any testimony or behavior which is inappropriate will be addressed and may result in that member of the public being removed from the hearing. Questions to and from the chair may be entertained at any time at the chair's discretion. Cross-examination of people testifying will not be allowed. However, if any person wishes to ask a question of another person during that person's testimony, please direct your question to the chair after being recognized. The chair is then free to decide whether or not to ask such questions of the person testifying. Prior to the commencement of the hearing, any party may challenge the qualifications of any commissioner for conflict of interest. This challenge must be documented with specific reasons supported by facts. Should any commissioner be challenged, the member may disqualify himself or herself, withdraw from the hearing, or make a statement on the record of their capacity to hear and decide this issue. At this time, do any members of the commission need to set forth any information that may be perceived as a conflict of interest?
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? If so, please state the nature and whether you can proceed. I see none.
And hearing none, does any party wish to challenge any commissioner or member of this hearing's body based on conflicts of interest?
As no challenges are presented, the hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief report.
Thank you very much, Chair Commissioner. And I'll begin with just some background and overview. This might be a bit of a reminder since this is the second module of the Clear and Objective project. We also have online, and they'll come up a little later in the presentation, but our consultant partners from MIG, we have Kate Rogers and Matt Hasty online. So they'll come online here in a few slides. Just so going over some background, starting in 2017, the Oregon State Legislature introduced a series of bills to encourage efforts to expand the supply of housing. These bills modified Oregon Revised Statute Section 197.307 subsection 4 by limiting local governments to clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures regulating the development of housing, including needed housing, and ensuring that any adopted standards may not have the effect of discouraging needed housing through unreasonable cost or delay. Initially, the clear and objective housing statutes were interpreted to only apply to incorporated cities with acknowledged urban growth boundaries, or UGBs. And then in 2023, House Bill 3197 clarified that the clear and objective housing statutes also apply to the following areas outside of UGBs, which include Deschutes County. The unincorporated communities designated in a county's acknowledged comprehensive plan after December 5th, 1994, non-resource lands, and areas zoned for rural residential use as defined in Oregon Revised Statute. The provisions of House Bill 3197 become effective on July 1st of this year. And at that time, any discretionary or subjective provisions of our existing code may be challenged due to their, unless there's a clear and objective path provided in that code. And so hence this project that we're undertaking the second module of. Generally, clear and objective standards are sort of a language, a text exercise that uses terms, definitions, measurements, and procedures that provide for consistent interpretation, such that there's no need for or ability for the reviewer to exercise any discretion in applying those standards. And it's largely avoiding terms like compatible or adequate or sufficient, things that you likely went over during Title 18. It's all there's a lot of similarity in the subjective language there. So there are a variety of approaches that can be used to craft clear and objective standards. One is true and false standards, so they can be used to evaluate whether a proposed development or proposal has satisfied a certain objective criterion just on face value. So, for instance, what is a structure on a lot or parcel that's within a rural residential zone? More of a yes or no, true false format. There can be counts and measurements, which are standards that are typically based on a minimum value, a maximum value, or an acceptable range of values. So, for instance, a minimum of 2 points of access for emergency vehicles on a property, something like that. There can be lists and menus. Lists and menus provide flexibility for applicants to meet a standard by choosing among several options. They can specify a range of options, so kind of any of the following as an example. Then there's some that can be a minimum of a number of those listed options, so at least 2 of the 5 or something to that effect. The statute does allow local governments to offer a discretionary review path as an optional alternative approach to the clear and objective standards. And ultimately, that's designed to provide as much flexibility as possible, especially for applicants that cannot or choose not to follow the clear and objective path. So we'll go over some of the specific proposal for tonight and the methodology used for that proposal. There is some language throughout Deschutes County Code that affects the development of housing that does not currently meet the identified thresholds for clear and objective standards. And so in response, we've identified areas of that code that reflect discretionary or subjective language, and we've packaged those into different modules to present to the hearings bodies. They tend to address a singular topic or a contained series of topics per module. And really that's broken into those segments just to provide the public as well as the county decision makers with sort of a digestible, more structured way to review this enormous amount of code and the text that this statute applies to. So specific to tonight, this is the second amendment package related to Title 17, which is our subdivisions title as it's written. Specifically, any of the provisions in Title 17 relating to housing or housing development are really the subject of this package, and any provisions of Title 17 related to certain lot configuration standards. So generally, we've preserved all existing uses within the code while modifying or clarifying just the language that doesn't currently meet clear and objective thresholds or just in the wording meeting those clear and objective standards. So policy decisions about whether a use is allowed or not allowed are not within the scope of that state mandated requirement. And so they're not part of this project, not part of tonight's packages or really any of the amendment packages you'll be receiving. So our general approach is to retain existing regulations where possible. And then you'll see tonight that in many sections where there's discretionary language, we've created one discretionary track. We call it a 2-track system. We've kind of maintained the existing discretionary language, and then we've created this breakaway second track for clear and objective language, which is either brand new language or amended language. And again, having both of those creates the most flexibility for someone that's trying to apply the code that works best for their housing development is the idea there. So the specific amendments throughout Title 17, it governs all land divisions, even though it's titled subdivisions. It also pertains to partitions and really any of the standards around those type of land divisions. You'll see that in the kind of the large text package tonight, there's the majority of the amendments are within the sections about land division platting. So any of the plan requirements or review requirements for partition or subdivision plats and the materials and the process for that. Lot design standards, including size, shape, and lot configuration. Access layout, including road frontage, sidewalks, bicycles, and things of that nature. Park development and road dedications. So to address these issues, we've proposed amendments to numerous sections throughout Title 17, but using generally this following methodology. I'll go over some of the main components here. So very broadly, where there's existing provisions that include the subjective language, and we've just kind of given a spoiler on this one a little bit, but we've created this 2-track system offering these 2 options. One is the existing discretionary path. The other is a clear and objective path. It allows for this selection of standards, really for flexibility and what works best for a given applicant. Kind of at a state level consideration, if an existing or newly included provision, procedure, or term is outlined already in Oregon revised statute or in state law, then that language has been adopted verbatim or by reference. And with the understanding that there are some state laws that supersede parts of this mandate as state laws do. They can conflict or they can overlap in different ways. And some of them have discretionary language, but we've tried to incorporate really clean references to state law where they are helpful and provide clear and objective language where possible. As sort of this is less frequent throughout the amendments, but if an existing provision has subjective language that could just be wholesale replaced with measurable quantitative standards that achieve the equivalent outcomes, then that's just been replaced without necessarily using the two-track system, just using more measurable or quantitative terms. And so this is kind of following up on module 1, but acknowledging that there are substantial differences between Title 17 and Title 18 that was just reviewed earlier in the year. And again, that was the definitions, dimensional standards, accessory uses module. There's some overlap in the terms there. So if there were definitions we could pull from Title 18, we incorporated them in here so they can speak to each other and cross-reference that way in sort of a helpful, unified way. There are there's certainly way different standards throughout these two titles as well. So there's just terms that are in Title 17 that are not in 18 and vice versa, but where they overlap, we've tried our best to kind of cross-reference those things. You'll see there's potentially some discussion about like adjoining and abutting and these terms like that now relate to a land division context, but we're more in just the general definitions module before. If an existing provision has criteria which could reasonably be interpreted in multiple ways, like how do you provide for the future re-subdivision of a property after a land division is completed, then either new language has been added to further clarify the provision, or we've provided explicit directions on how to interpret that standard. You'll see that many of the road development standards have been removed from Title 17 and added to Title 12, which is our road, sidewalks, and public places title. These are standards almost exclusively dictated by what we call external requirements that are for where there's engineering certifications or things like utilities or surveying that are brought into the provisions themselves. And so those have been housed sort of collectively within the Title 12, which is just completely exclusively related to that rather than this land division title. So that was one central component. Some other considerations here is that and this is more context based, is that over time, there's been numerous interpretive challenges for Title 17 over the years. One is related to what I was just mentioning, is that this is, titled subdivisions. And so why historically had road development standards been included in that title, and how are they applied if a land division is not the subject of a proposal? So this in certain ways seeks to clarify that as well under this clear and objective exercise. And just on the Title 12 note, that title is not subject to the same legislative amendment process as this. It'll eventually go to the Board of County Commissioners and they have to review all the packaged amendments. But any feedback that we receive about Title 17 from the Planning Commission will inform that further discussion before the board. So if there's any implications, any recommendation that's coming from the PC about the Title 17 work, and it really has pertinent, influence on what's happening on the Title 12 review, then we'll definitely mention that and cross-reference as needed. It basically points to a lot of different components in Title 12, so they have to be able to speak to each other, so to speak. And we'll just go over a few examples here next. And for that, I was hoping to introduce, there's Kate Rogers online from MIG and Matt Hasty. They're our consultant partners. They've been really helpful as we worked not just with planning staff, but with the road department, engineering staff, the county surveyor, a whole lot of different folks. So I'll just let you guys take it away with the examples if you're ready.
Yes, we are ready. Thank you so much, Tarek, and good evening, commissioners. So as Tarek mentioned, I'm Kate Rogers with MIG, and I'm also joined by Matt Hasty, who is here mostly to help answer questions if anything comes up that we can help with. But first, I'm going to step through 3 examples from Title 17 that we thought really kind of illustrated the approach that we've taken throughout the title to address this requirement for having a clear and objective set of standards for housing applications. So the first example is, it's one of the approval criteria for subdivisions. And we've highlighted in blue this, the discretionary or subjective language in the existing criterion, which is that the subdivision will not create excessive demand on public facilities and services and utilities required to serve the development. So that phrase, create excessive demand, of course, is very subjective and would be difficult to apply in a clear and objective manner. So we've proposed a solution here to require written confirmation from the various service providers that would need to provide, the utility and public infrastructure service to the development. So to really ensure that the development can be adequately served by that infrastructure. So then on the next slide, we'll see the actual proposed language, or at least an abbreviated version of the proposed language. So it says the tentative plan for the proposed subdivision shall demonstrate adequate provision of services through submittal of, and then it kind of goes through a list of the various pieces that need to be submitted to demonstrate the utilities and infrastructure can adequately serve the proposed development. So a letter from the water supply district that has confirmation from the Oregon Water Resources Department, a written statement from an engineer that says the plan will comply with the Central Oregon Stormwater Manual, which provides the set of kind of guidelines and regulations for stormwater management. A will serve letter from the Oregon State Fire Marshal, or whichever the responding fire protection district is. And then there's a few others that are kind of along those same lines. So basically you have to kind of submit these items to demonstrate you've communicated with those different service districts and utility providers, and they have kind of signed off on the proposal that they can provide that service that is needed. So again, that's the clear and objective approach. We've in all three of these examples, actually, we've retained the existing discretionary language as kind of the general standard, and this clear and objective standard is what applies to a housing development, unless the applicant opts to go through the discretionary process. So that's the first one. Then moving on to the second example.
I would have a quick question on the example you just provided.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just an example or if it's something in the code. You mentioned a will serve letter from the fire marshal or fire protection district. Is fire service required now for building in the state?
I don't know across the board, but this is in instances where that, if there is an applicable fire district or fire marshal consideration, a lot of these will be kind of access based, I would say. If there's some question about adequate access for, say, an emergency service vehicle, for instance, and there was notice goes almost across the board always to a fire agency. And so often those requirements are prompted by their comments if they comment back on a proposal. And so I would say that is one indication of when that kind of compliance needs to be demonstrated through a will serve letter in this instance. But then there's also other instances where if it's a vacant property, for instance, and they're within a fire district's jurisdiction, we would likely say, there needs to be some type of upfront will serve letter from.
Okay, yeah, and I could certainly agree with a letter from a fire department confirming they have access within a fire district, but I know there's a lot of unprotected properties within the county that I just, based on this, wouldn't be buildable if that was the case. I just thought I'd double check if the code requires fire department protection.
I mean, under this clear and objective path, that's really the way the language is crafted. It sounds like there was an instance where they're not in a district and there's a concern about wildfire risk, then the review of that safety adequacy might be something that rises to a discretionary review threshold. That I would say that's something that's not fitting within necessarily like a really clean, is there a fire district, yes or no, sort of a binary clear and objective read of at least with that topic in mind.
Okay, well, you might double check code to see if it's a requirement, because I'm not aware of any. I can understand certainly how it would be recommended, but I'm suspicious there's no actual either state or county code that requires fire protection.
And not on the county side necessarily. There's sort of but I can check on the state.
Anyhow, just a thought. I mean, it may be something may have to edit, and like I say, that was my question, is whether it was just a philosophical or just a contrived example, or whether this was actual language in the code.
No, I mean, I think it's trying to be, often this was a kind of a across the board difficulty, was trying to make an exhaustive list of any iteration of what might happen. This was including concerns about wildfire risk, really, but no, it's not some ubiquitous across the board county provision, but I can definitely look into the state.
Anyhow, sorry to interrupt.
Not at all. No.
Go ahead.
Thanks for the comment. Kate, sorry, go ahead whenever you're ready.
No worries. All right. I think we're on to example 2. So next slide. So this this item has to do with future re-subdivision, that section of Title 17. And here the existing criterion is that where a tract of land is divided into lots or parcels of an acre or more, the hearings body may require, and you see the term or the phrase may require. So that's kind of, it's not totally clear whether that this item would be required or not. May require an arrangement of lots or parcels and streets such as to permit future re-subdivision in conformity to the street requirements and other requirements contained in DCC Title 17. So what this criterion is kind of trying to get at is that if you're proposing a land division that creates sort of larger parcels than what would be sort of the minimum size of a parcel or lot, that there needs to be some assurance that those larger parcels could be further subdivided in the future to meet the county's standards. So to address the subjective language here, the proposed solution is to require the applicant to demonstrate that these larger lots that are created could be further divided to meet specific lot, block, and street standards. So on the next slide, we have the proposed language. Again, this is an abbreviated version of the language because it's pretty lengthy. But so where a partition or subdivision will create individual lots or parcels that are greater than or equal to 2 times the minimum lot size. So kind of establishing that threshold of when this criterion is really triggered or kicked in. So if it's a lot or parcel that could be further divided into 2 or more lots, then the applicant shall demonstrate that the lots or parcels could be further divided or replatted in the future to create lots or parcels that conform to the size and dimension standards in Title 18 through 21 and facilitate streets and blocks in conformance with 1736 and other sections of the code. So essentially, this is sort of restating kind of a similar provision, but just being a little bit more specific about what is triggering the requirement, what the specific standards are that need to be complied with. So referencing specific, size and dimension standards. And then again, referencing specific street and block standards and other specific sections of the code. So just kind of clarifying all those pieces. And then again, this is the clear and objective path, and then the discretionary path, which is still an option and still remains in the code, would be the existing language that's there today. And then the third example, this gets at the fire hazard issue that we've kind of been touching on. So the existing criterion is whenever possible. So again, that's kind of pretty discretionary, subjective language. A minimum of 2 points of access to the subdivision or partition shall be provided to provide assured access for emergency vehicles and ease resident evacuation. So that phrase, whenever possible, really needs to be replaced with clear and objective language to make it clear whenever this requirement would be in place. So the solution here is to require at least 2 points of access for all subdivisions. So that's kind of the clear and objective standard, is you have to meet this two points of access standard. But then if you said, hey, I don't really need to meet that, or, you had kind of some justification for not providing those 2 points of access, then you would still have the clear and objective, kind of the existing option to demonstrate why that's not possible in your specific application. So on the next slide, we'll see the proposed clear and objective criterion, which is just, again, a minimum of 2 points of access shall be provided. So that's the clear and objective standard, pretty cut and dry. You just need to do this thing. But again, you still have that option if you want to apply under the discretionary provisions. So again, these are just kind of 3 examples that illustrate how we've approached the Title 17 amendments. You'll see a range of other types of proposed amendments throughout the package, but I think these are some that sort of illustrate what we were trying to do. So happy to answer any other questions if you have any.
Any questions? Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. And just to kind of wrap up here, we have some just input on public and agency comments. So we've had no agency comments received to date, but we did just yesterday receive one public comment from Daniel Robinson with Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt. And there were various concerns outlined with just probably 6 different provisions of the code amendments. And there was a request for a continued public hearing within that public comment. And then just a couple hours ago, we had a second public comment from Rand Campbell with Rand Campbell Law LLC. And they were similarly outlining various concerns. This one seemed focused in some ways on frontage requirements. And I've printed both out. They're both in electronic record, but I figured just because they came in the last 24 hours that you have a printed kind of courtesy copy there. This is one of several amendments that are part of a clear and objective project package. So there's going to be more. There'll be additional modules that come over the next few months. We're all trying to shoot for that July 1st effective date and get everything done before that, including the whole board process and adoption and everything. But there will be several more modules, one of which is going to be, and I think this, all things going smoothly and going according to schedule. The next one in line, I think, will be the county's Goal 5 resources. That include landscape management combining zones, the wildlife area combining zones, wetlands and riparian resources, and scenic resources and similar resources like that. There'll be cluster and plan development standards, and then there'll be any additional sections that are most pertinent to the development of housing. Those will come online in the coming months. So one thing just to kind of overarching, I know this was brought up during the Title 18 process, but while these amendments reflect best practices and are responsive to that state statute, this is an evolving document. We're going to keep refining this according to any implications from state law or anything that comes out of the public process or otherwise. So we can always revisit this title. We can always further refine this code well into the future, if not indefinitely. So it's always something that we're able to adjust. So next steps just for tonight, there's some options for moving forward after this public hearing process. So we can either continue the hearing to a date and time certain, close the hearing and leave the written record open to a date certain, close the hearing and set a date for deliberations, or close the hearing and commence deliberations. And with that, I'm available for any questions, and my contact information's on the screen here for anyone online. And I might stop sharing my presentation for now, but myself and then Matt Hasty and Kate Rogers will be available for any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Just these letters, one thing is reflecting would require 30 feet of road frontage for each lot or parcel. So that obviously does not apply to existing subdivisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if anything comes up with a land division in general, then, and there was the question about, does it have adequate frontage, then this provision would apply. If no one's proposing anything, if that's getting at what you're saying, if no one's coming in with a proposal for a land division or any other proposal that gets affected by this, this language, then no, that wouldn't affect them necessarily.
Okay, and I kind of get it from what they're saying. 30 feet of frontage, I mean, that means on both sides of the street. If that's how I understand.
Frontage is just where your driveway, so to speak, would touch a road. So often there's these kind of flag lot portions of lots that drag all the way out to a road, kind of a thing. So that's what they're saying they want 30 feet of the apron touching that 30 feet worth of road.
30 feet wide of apron.
Right.
Okay.
Well, along the length of a road. Exactly.
Okay, I was reading it direction from street to lot line.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It's where the apron, the actual boundaries of a property front on a road.
I don't think my apron's 30 feet.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's a lot of non-conforming uses in the county. This is just for proposals that would come under this language.
Okay, is that everything?
That was everything for the presentation.
Any
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, Commissioner.
Oh, well, I was going to ask if you're ready for a motion or you want to, sounds like you want to check.
Thought I'd see if anybody wanted to comment.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here who would like to speak to this? Have you got a blue form you could? Or why don't you turn it in when you get done? But give us your name and address.
My name's Rand Campbell. My address is 20350 Tumalo Road. I submitted the written comments that you have in front of you. Thank you, Tarek. And Tarek talked a little bit about what I submitted. First off, I just want to say like the legislative amendments that were the precursor to these county text amendments. They were enacted due to the housing supply shortage, and as Tarek said, they're meant to expand the supply of housing. But in a lot of cases, rather than simplifying the process for housing development, these amendments will actually tighten the restrictions on the development of housing. I think it was well intentioned, but I do think there are some unintended consequences with the proposed amendments. And from the outset, I would just like to say that I would like to the request for you guys to continue the hearing to another date to provide additional time to review these amendments. I think there's a lot of amendments. It's also spring break, so I know some people that would have been here to attend this meeting couldn't make it, and I think it's warranted to give some extra time and time for additional comment. And then there's a few issues that I wanted to specifically talk about. Mostly the access and road frontage requirements. Like I said, I didn't have a time to go all the way through all the text amendments, but I looked at mostly kind of the partition requirements and in the lens of like rural partitions, EFU zone, resource zone, land, farm and forest zone land. So there, as Tarek explained, there's 2 tracks now for partitions. They're in 1722 020. It used to be 020. Now there's 020 and 025. One's the discretionary track and one's a clear and objective track. So those are the access requirements that require that the partition is accessed by roads dedicated to the public or by Forest Service or BLM roads. And then there's also a similar road frontage requirement in 1736 180. And when you look at these two, the amendments to both of these sections together, it actually takes away some of the flexibility that was previously in the code. Currently, and specifically when a property is accessed through BLM or Forest Service land, currently the code allows for a 20-foot wide or 20 feet of frontage. So, your new parcels that you're creating have to touch the road 20 feet of the road. And now it got rid of the flexibility, and then it made it so that every new parcel in a partition has to have 30 feet of frontage. And I understand and I agree that in most cases, the 30-foot moving into a 30-foot frontage makes sense. Typically for partitions, you would have to, as the county code is now, you'd have to have 50 feet of frontage. And that's why you see a lot of those flag lots that widen up at the end, because the county requires a 30-foot flag pole. And then the frontage requirement is 50 feet. So they flare out to 50 feet. And clients always ask me, why do you have to do that? And I say, well, it's the county's requirement. And they say that doesn't make sense. So anyway, I agree that, for most cases, changing it to a 30-foot wide frontage makes sense. But for new parcels that are accessed from Forest Service roads or BLM roads, this is actually making it more strict. And it's difficult to have frontage on those BLM and Forest Service roads because they generally only allow, or like if they're granting a new easement or right of way or permit, a road permit, they're, somewhere between 15 to 30 feet wide, and then have to get frontage on those. But if the road's only 20 feet wide and it goes straight into a property, then you only have 20 feet of, even potential frontage on that road. So then if you were to be splitting it into 3 parcels and you need 30 feet of frontage on each parcel, you need 90 feet of frontage on that road, but the road only touches the property for 20 feet. And so then there are some various ways, like you can then dedicate a cul-de-sac, but I just don't think that really makes sense. So I think retaining the option for 20 feet of frontage on the Forest Service and BLM roads makes the most sense. I'm also gonna talk about the same issue for access through publicly owned lands that are owned by the state rather than the federal government. But just one more thing on the frontage. I really don't think the frontage requirement is necessary. And it's unnecessarily restrictive on in the rural environment and on rural properties especially. I mean, a lot of other counties don't require that you have frontage on a public road. A lot of the partitions, they, are accessed, the actual properties and the houses on them are accessed by an easement. And then the various parcels are basically big flag lots, and you probably see them on Dial or on county maps. Like newer partitions, they'll have a whole bunch of, long flag poles, and then there'll be one road and that goes to the different houses, and people, they have an easement and they get to their house by going on the road, but yet they still have these flag poles that wrap around to the public road, and they're oftentimes in places where you couldn't build a road or you never would want to build a road. And I think it makes it kind of unusable land and property boundary, issue in the future. It's like, does everybody fence all these little flag poles? How do they maintain them? Do they use them for forest use or agricultural use? So I don't think that it's necessary to have the frontage requirement. You can, have the same effect by using an easement, and the county can require that people, show proof of the easement to provide legal and ongoing access. And then a similar thing is the current code only contemplates access through, as far as the access requirements, through federally owned land. So it says like for the 2 different code provisions are the ones I quoted and the ones that are in my letter, the 1722 and then 1736, and the 1722 is what I call the access requirements, and then 1736, that's the road frontage requirements. And they both only contemplate access through Forest Service and BLM land, but there are some properties, especially rural ones in the county, that take access through state-owned land, DSL or Department of State Lands land. And so they have this, DSL has a, similar process to Forest Service and BLM for providing access. Generally, they grant right-of-way easements for a specific period of time. And it's difficult to dedicate the road through the state, just like it is through the federal government. And I just think this is a good opportunity to update the code to reflect that, that partitions partitions that are accessed through state-owned land should have the same requirements as partitions that are accessed through federal land. And then the main ones, oh, the to and through requirements, 17, 36, 80, future extensions of streets. This has been in the code. It's if you partition a property, you have to, and there's another property that could be divided, and you know, adjacent to that property, you have to dedicate a public road through your property so that in theory that other property could be you know, divided in the future. What the first thing is, as the codes the new amendments add more restrictions or more language to that. I think they in a way clarify some things, but they also make it more burdensome. And I think there should be an exception in there for parcels that are like, you shouldn't have to dedicate a road through a rural property if there's a publicly owned parcel that is the property you would be dedicating the road to. So let me illustrate that by an example. Like if you had a 200-acre or forest zone property and you wanted to partition it into two parcels of 100 acres, and there was a Forest Service parcel that was like 1,000 acres on the far side of it, as the code's currently written, or at least as I understand, you would have to, because that Forest Service parcel's 1,000 acres and that could be divided under the current zoning laws, then you would have to dedicate a road through your property to the Forest Service parcel. I don't think you have to build the road, but it's still public and anybody could go on that. And there's a lot of problems that could arise from that. So I think at the least, there should be some additional language in that future extensions of street standard to clarify that publicly owned land that could be divided, you don't need to dedicate a road to that land. And then
Are you getting closer?
yeah, that's it.
I would ask that if you've got some specific red line suggestions
Mhm.
on proposed changes, that you submit exactly the proposed language you're suggesting.
Okay.
It would make it a whole lot easier than just to ask for a solution to a problem without giving us some specifics.
Okay, yeah, I would be happy to. Again, there wasn't a lot of time to prepare, so I would be great if you could continue the hearing, and I would provide specific example or specific language that's desired.
So you're specifically asking for a continuance of the hearing itself,
Yes.
or just leave the record open so you could submit written comment?
No, a continuance for another hearing, so more oral testimony could be provided and written testimony could be provided before that hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Doesn't look like anybody in the audience. Is there anyone online? Okay, seeing as none, the chair would entertain a motion.
I apologize for jumping the gun earlier. I got excited by the next step slide and the requests for, we've now actually had two, because the other comment we received in writing also requested to keep the hearing open, which I'm interpreting means the hearing, not just the written
And that's
record.
why I wanted to clarify the intent.
Great question. Yeah, because that popped up for me too. So I'm noticing also that we do have a timeline. Actually, I'm going to make the motion and then I'll explain while I'm making it. So I'm going to move to leave the oral and written testimony open through you guys may have to help me with the exact language, but basically up until / through April 10th, when we have our meeting, and that we also plan to deliberate that same evening. So we would have a hearing, receive written testimony up until whatever time on that day, and then we would deliberate later on the agenda of the meeting. That's the motion.
Moving to continue the hearing.
Yep.
continue the hearing through the next meeting, at which point you would propose closing it.
Well, I guess we'll have to see what people want to do at that point, but I guess, I'm making the motion with the note that that would certainly be an option, that we could still stay on track with deliberations. Yeah.
I might suggest that we maybe then not put specifics on closing it, just
Fair.
continue the hearing through the next meeting. And then at that point, we can entertain a motion on next steps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that seems more proper. And then when we get to the part where I explain why I'm making the motion, I'll then note that.
Okay.
But for the AI purposes, the motion that I'm making as Commissioner Curis is to leave the public hearing open, including written and oral, through our meeting on April 10th.
Okay. Is there a second?
Commissioner Williams would second it.
Great. Comments?
Yeah, so I just think that if we feel like it, we can leave the oral and written record open again at that point, but if we don't want to and we want to close it, we can. And this option, I like this option because it gives both of our citizens who provided comment additional time to submit something in writing, or other people that they know that are interested in providing testimony are able to be here in person because of spring break, an opportunity. But I also want to respect that. I guess I just want to mention that this doesn't necessarily mean we get off track with our deliberations process and our timeline. It could mean that, but it also could, we still have the opportunity to deliberate on that day if that's what the planning commission wants to do. And I am noting all of that because normally we have 2 weeks in between. We usually hear from everybody and then we wait another couple weeks to deliberate, and we don't necessarily have to do that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any online? I don't see I don't see a screen.
I would have one question,
Certainly, go ahead.
Mark. If we have a couple of questions between now and the public hearing, would you like us to submit them as public comment, or as a planning commissioner, email you and blind CC everyone else?
I think it'd be one in the same. I'd ask
Okay.
for both, but have it, be because of forum kind of procedural error, just to have it be an individual comment, and it'll be just that. It'll be a comment that we put into record, and then we can address that and respond at the continued public hearing on the 10th.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would not CC any of the other planning commission.
I was blind.
No, but I mean, even so, because any communication to more than 2 other people becomes a quorum. So I direct everything to
Yeah.
Tarek.
Exactly. Yeah, and exactly. It's like in the past, if it's just an individual record materials, other informational materials, comments, questions, we can take those in. I'll put them in record, just like the other comments.
And I will have some more of my own comments that I'll submit directly.
Great. Yeah. Sounds
So anybody else?
Susan's waiting.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm on my phone and I can't find the little raise your hand button. My question about Commissioner Curis's motion is, if we leave the written record open all the way until April 10th, I mean, how does that, I guess this would be a question for staff, how does that affect their ability to get this all together if we were to try to do deliberations on the same day?
That was, I was going to kind of get to that. That's very
Okay.
astute of you. So you would run the risk of, and we often do get these things like 90 minutes before a hearing, and that's for whatever reason. And so I think that that's likely to be exactly what happens again on the afternoon of April 10th. And so you will have as much time as you've had to read those printed comments this evening, if that is the case. So while that you have complete discretion over the length of that written record, we often suggest that it's like a week in advance, because then we can package that into the agenda packet for you to read for a full week before we actually get to that public meeting. It's completely your discretion, but that is sort of a logistical consideration I wanted to point out, just like Commissioner Altman's mentioned.
So I would anticipate that if we leave the record open for 2 weeks, and then we close the hearing and leave the record open for for another week, the end result would be that it would push the deliberations back by 1 meeting and just stack it up with whatever else that we've accumulated in the meantime. And given the vast number of people here tonight, that the hearing is probably going to go short, I would anticipate, it probably won't really push our whole timeline at all. It'll just add a little bit more to the following meeting.
That's probably exactly right. I think, yeah, and the only other consideration which was mentioned by Commissioner Curious is just that legislative mandate. Like, we have to still package this all before the board, and they'll have to adopt by emergency at this rate anyway. But the work session preparing anything that happens at this phase for the board is also an overall time consideration. But I know you guys are aware of that.
I mean, the bottom line is, the reality is we have several more packets, and I anticipate that we can play catch up on another one.
I have a question.
Certainly.
So is it possible to close the written record after a week and then still have a public hearing on the 10th? We've never done that before, so that's why I'm asking.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Our CDD director.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Karas, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. I mean, it is technically possible, but I think it could be counterproductive, because especially with the nuances and the complexity of clear and objective language, you just as the chair noted as a suggestion to the party that just testified, seeing written remarks as they are supplemented by oral testimony is really helpful. I think again, it's the Planning Commission's discretion, and as noted by the chair, you're talking about an additional week potentially, and so I think the commission needs to make sure you have enough time to review this material. And so what's genuinely being acknowledged is there's members of the development community that would like to weigh in on this packet. And that's respectful. And so by leaving the record open for both oral and written testimony to the 10th, hearing that testimony, and then, to the extent that you feel it's necessary to keep the written record open for 5 or 6 days, that's an option. You may find that the written material's already been provided. There's no other real remarks or requests to keep the record open. Anyway, the Planning Commission can set itself up for a robust deliberation on April 24th. And then, we can just go from there. And you may find that deliberations takes longer than necessary. We are under this kind of arbitrary, what feels somewhat arbitrary. The state set this deadline. Our code is complex. And at the end of the day, this Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners needs to have a process that allows everyone to make an informed, in your case, a recommendation. So use the time that you feel is appropriate. We'll take it from here and understand the implications if we don't meet the July 1st deadline. That's something that we'll clearly have to have a contingency, as will many counties that are facing the same mandate.
So, yes.
And we might find during the public hearing that we actually want to do a matrix for our deliberations. That might be something where enough information is provided that we might have do we want to do this or do we want to do that? So.
Yeah. Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
In favor of my motion?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm in favor of my motion. Sorry, guys.
Sorry. All right. The hearing is continued. And then we'll address next steps at that meeting. So, next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the work plan for the fiscal year 25-26.
Well, good evening, Chair Cyrus and members of the Planning Commission, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. If you'd like, we had one planning commissioner just step aside for a second. I can certainly wait a few minutes if you want, or I can jump right into the PowerPoint.
You guys, do you want to take a 5-minute break, recess, or go ahead and continue?
Jump in, you can't cover that much.
Okay.
All right, daring me. You're daring me. Thank you. Okay, well, great. I have a short PowerPoint presentation for those that I don't think we have. I'm grateful for the individuals that are here today, both staff and members of the public. I'm not sure if we have members online, but it's always helpful to talk about the planning division's work plan as we propose it for fiscal year 25 and 26. So the public hearing process today, this is not land use, but I'll just provide context for the work plan, answer any questions you may have, and then we can open it to the public for any comments, recommendations. So for background, the Community Development Department prepares an annual work plan. Since the Planning Commission is focused on land use policy, I'm asking you to focus specifically on the Planning Division work plan. As all of you know, that the Planning Division identifies high priority projects, and I'll talk about how those are selected, and then it allows this body and ultimately the board to confirm those projects that we should undertake with the resources that we have. And then as the year progresses, as we complete projects and we have capacity, we can utilize both the Planning Commission and the board to identify other projects that can be undertaken. Of course, the Community Development Department is more than just the Planning Division. Just a shout out to the other 4 divisions: a Building Division, Code Enforcement, Coordinated Services, and On-Site Wastewater. There's a link here to access this draft work plan and our work plans that have been adopted or acknowledged over the years. If you want to see what we've done in the past and how quickly we can get to projects. But we are, if anything, transparent and are grateful for the ability to talk about the projects that we want to undertake. And as noted in the report, I'm not going to summarize it today just in the interest of time, but we also have an annual report that summarizes what we've done over the last 12 months. So worth looking at. How do we identify projects? It's based on Board of County Commissioners' goals and objectives, changes in state law, which was a plug for what you just discussed and have been discussing in terms of House Bill 3197 and clear and objective standards for housing. We get grants and funding resources. We got funding for House Bill 3197, so that provides further momentum. We really value, and I know this body values, public comments from our residents and stakeholders to identify projects that are meaningful for them. And then invariably, we have projects that carry over from one year to the other. And so that can create some additional demands and consume resources that at times we may not have ever anticipated. An example of that, and I'll make note of it, is this Planning Commission spent months on the comp plan update. And the Board of County Commissioners, after going through a robust public process, adopted the comprehensive plan update, only for it to be appealed by Central Oregon Land Watch. They raised issues that weren't identified really during the hearings process. They don't have to under a legislative process. Nicole worked with the Board of County Commissioners to have them reconsider their decision, basically withdraw for reconsideration, so that the issues that were raised by Land Watch can be can be addressed in a hearing that's narrowly tailored to that specific issue. Nicole will talk about that under staff comments. That hearing for reconsideration is April 23rd, if my dates are right. She can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's an example of a project that is requiring additional resources. So of course we have a hearing tonight. Staff's recommending keeping the record open, closing the oral record tonight, keeping the written record open, and deliberate and make a recommendation on April 10th. The Historic Landmarks Commission always gets an opportunity to talk about this work plan. Their work's really funded through a certified local government grant passed through by the State Historic Preservation Office, but it's still an opportunity to put a plug in for the plan. And then later in May or in June, the board will have their hearing and then acknowledge the work plan as it pertains to the entire department. Okay. So I just mentioned ongoing commitment for when under ongoing commitments, I just mentioned the reconsideration of the comprehensive plan. We have on our work plan, as I look over at Commissioner Williams, who represents Southern Deschutes County, we have it on our work plan to kick off the Newberry Country Plan, which is an area plan for Southern Deschutes County for the rural areas south of Sun River and excluding the city of La Pine. Those are lands that are subject to our jurisdiction. We certainly want to hear back from Sun River and La Pine, but that's the area that's really subject to the Newberry Country Plan. Now, other items that I just want to highlight, we have ongoing commitments with the city of Bend. One of them, it's a bill, and the bill is noted in your work plan, but I think later this month, there's some special legislation that allows the city of Bend to expedite an urban growth boundary amendment to address some affordable housing and workforce housing opportunities. So that's something that requires coordination under growth management. We put this under kind of the umbrella of the city of Bend, but there's ongoing coordination with the Bend Park and Recreation District for suitable park space in Southeast Bend. There actually is a hearing scheduled with the board next month to consider a plan amendment zone change that would allow a regional park in Southeast Bend subject to our zoning requirements. City of La Pine, collaborating with their staff on their implementation of their comprehensive plan update. There's also land that we own that we've talked about in the past, the Newberry neighborhood, where there's opportunities to update that zoning designation and its master plan to make sure it's meeting the community's expectation as they continue to grow as one of our youngest cities in the state. City of Redmond, same thing. We often coordinate with them on their comprehensive plan. There's some work that's been identified in the joint management agreement in an urban holding zone to address clear and objective standards within lands that's not in their city limits, but within the urban growth boundary. So that's identified. And then the city of Redmond has some really ambitious ideas and expectations to see if they can establish an interchange from McVeigh, create an interchange onto South Highway 97. So that's an ongoing coordination effort. And if that ended up getting real momentum, it would require an amendment to our transportation system plan. And then lastly, City of Sisters, we continue to coordinate with them. Nicole is kind of the liaison in that effort, to shout out to her. They're going to be expanding their urban growth boundary, I think, this year. And when they do, that process will go before I anticipate the Planning Commission for feedback and input. So we have a statutory responsibility under ORS 195 to coordinate on growth management issues. So those are examples of how we do that. This topic, I take a pause. The Dark Skies update, this has been on the Planning Commission's list as a priority. It is noted by staff. Tanya Saltzman, a senior planner, as time is available, is building some text amendments that can address best management practices. I highlight this because I know it's important to you. We just need the capacity to get to it. This is a project that was identified last year. We didn't get a chance to unveil it, but we certainly hope to do so this next fiscal year. Groundwater protection continues to be an emphasis of ours, to coordinate with the Department of Environmental Quality to ensure residents in Southern Deschutes County we can rely on a safe, reliable source of drinking water through their domestic wells primarily. Other three issues, natural hazards. You are well aware of the legislation that's out there. I can summarize it under staff comments, but there's legislation that looks like it's going to rescind the statewide wildfire hazard map. And then in return, and Chair Cyrus and I were chatting about this a little bit this morning, just coordinating for tonight's meeting. The way the legislation is being crafted as we speak would allow local governments, it would give local governments the discretion, not the requirement, but the discretion to develop fire hardening requirements, defensible space requirements, through different, provisions of code, using carrots, incentives, regulatory means if necessary, which would be the analogy of a stick. But I anticipate later this summer that I think this legislation that's currently being discussed in Salem will pass. And I think there will be tremendous interest to have community conversations about what it means to implement defensible space and fire hardening. What does it mean to be in a fire-wise community? Is that something that should be incentivized? I think those conversations will take place. I think the Planning Commission will have a role on that. I think there's a real possibility that there would be code amendments that would target certain rural residential areas for these types of measures to remain resilient in a fire adapted ecosystem. So natural hazards, as this commission has undoubtedly been aware of for the last several years, and members of our community have for even longer, continues to be a prominent topic. So that takes me into the natural hazards mitigation plan, which requires some coordination as well. And then I'm just throwing out roses there to Nicole Mardell, who's our coordinator for sage grouse, and as a cooperating agency. And I know the Board of County Commissioners is interested in a conversation with BLM on sage grouse designations, more from an education standpoint. So that's supposed to happen later in June. Another shout out to Nicole for filling in any gaps I'm missing. Understood comments later tonight. Board strategies, again, is to amend the county code for, again, this is a legislative directive under House Bill 2538, pertaining to occupancy for unrelated persons. Also continuing to champion legislation that allows for rural housing opportunities and addresses homelessness. Staff continue to monitor the sewer, Terrebonne's sanitary district efforts, as well as Tumalo's sanitary, or I should say, sewer district, to see how they're progressing in their efforts to try to establish sewer in those rural communities. Zoning text amendments. I'm not going to list all these in the interest of time, but there are several of them. I will say that I anticipate the development community getting behind I'm identifying 3 now in black, but the middle one, the lot line adjustments and replatting, there's a lot of interest in having us execute that text amendment. It is, there's been some changes or recognitions under state law in terms of allowing lot line adjustments to be modified that can allow for further development opportunity. This has been on our list of things to do. And the development community I think is going to lean respectfully on tackling some of these amendments because it'll provide for some development opportunities for their clients. So a wide array of code amendments, again, that are listed in your materials that are representative of what we'd like to tackle. Invariably, many of these, if not all of these, have been carried over from last year. Citizen comments, duly noted that we put in the packet at your last meeting and the meeting before last, there was a genuine conversation about the importance of panel discussions. And so Chair Cyrus had some ideas about panels that would be worthwhile to convene when there are resources available. So that was noted. As the Planning Commission experienced a couple meetings ago, and it's in your packet, Greg Bryant is very interested in Deschutes River Woods becoming an unincorporated community. I provided out tonight some additional perspectives on panel discussions from Ms. Gould, who is just emphasizing the importance that they're balanced I gather that at your last meeting, Will communicated to you, but we have one commissioner, again, to Southern Deschutes County issues that would like us to recognize the opportunity when it's available to explore a goal of an exception again for Southern Deschutes County pertaining to groundwater. So highlighting those remarks. Next steps, I'm almost done. This is the public hearing for the Planning Commission to take testimony on the work plan. Staff's respectfully recommending that you close the hearing tonight for oral testimony. Keep the written record open for a week, and then prepare to deliberate on April 10th. And then, as you've done in the past, you often rate not just the text amendments, but your highest priority projects. And that's been really useful. And you'll see in your packet in the memo, we articulated how you communicated last year's recommendation to the board. So that's always very, very helpful. I mentioned the Historic Landmarks Commission's opportunity to review these materials on the 5th, the forthcoming board work session and public hearings occurring later this spring. And so that's it for me. I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman, for any questions that the Planning Commission may have, and then allow you to open the hearing. Thank you for your time.
Great. Are there any questions? All right. I'll open this up to the public hearing. Is there anybody, members of the public who would like to speak? Is there anybody online that would like to speak? Okay, seeing as none, is there a, so, yes, go ahead.
This is directed for you, Peter. Regarding the balance for what Nunzi provided in comment, how does it work selecting the panelists? Who selects them? Do we vote as the planning commission? Like, do we get a list of people for a certain topic, or is it the planning department who selects the experts for the panel? I was just curious how that works out.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, Commissioner Stockamp. We would be looking for direction from the Planning Commission. I mean, staff will do the logistical legwork. We would look to you to be as descriptive as possible and it would be I think a communication about, we would be sharing our ideas collectively. But ultimately we're looking to the Planning Commission to guide us on not necessarily individuals, although you may have some individuals, but if it was an organization, if it was an agency, a group, we would certainly, if you didn't know somebody in particular, we would reach out to them and respectfully ask for their participation. But we really lean on the Planning Commission. And it would be iterative of what types of questions are we thinking about answering? What are the topics? What's our goals? Once you are answering those and providing a guided framework, then it will inform the types of panelists that you would like to have. And then our staff would do the legwork to get that scheduled so that you could have a robust panel with citizen input, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago. So I think that's how we've done it in the past.
Great.
Yes, I guess I would anticipate that we would probably include that discussion as part of deliberations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I was kind of thinking a similar question about, creating a really balanced panel discussion, because that would be really important to me too. And I was also kind of thinking of, after this work plan, is kind of finalized, that would determine a panel. Like, I would hope that it would be a productive, there was a ton of panels I would just love to hear, but I would hope that it would be, and, as close to the work that we are going to be discussing, so that it's fresh in our memories, it's relevant, maybe. And what I was also thinking is, man, wouldn't this be an interesting way we're always trying to create community engagement. Isn't this a great way to bring in more community and get more conversations going? So I was kind of thinking of similar.
So, and I guess I would kind of rein it back in. If you've got some specific suggestions, that would be good to submit as testimony, and then we can deliberate on the specifics at our next, when we schedule deliberations.
And what I would offer, all of this is super helpful. as you, the hearing is still technically open, but as you consider closing the oral record, keeping the written record open, and then deliberations on April 10th, on the 10th, you may find that you want to highlight one or two panels, as resources become available, and really, if you want, if the stamina is there and you think this is productive, really begin thinking about that level of direction. Not that we have to solve all those questions, but I think what would be helpful for us is, as the work plan is getting acknowledged, and there's going to, I'm sure there'll be a recognition for, having panel discussions, letting Will Grove's team know, as staff, as resources become available, begin planning for a panel over the course of the next 3, 5, 6 months, and knowing what type of panel you want and the types of questions you want to, the type of topics or questions you want answered, would allow our staff to then, as time becomes available, to start building that panel. And then, I'm just doing scenario planning, but there could be a moment where we're having a meeting in August where, listen, we're beginning to prepare a panel and we're identifying a date that's forthcoming, and it's all coming together in a way that allows us to promote it, as Commissioner Kelly just noted, to really invite the public to participate and experience experts on a topic that's extremely relevant for our community.
So, any other comments or questions? If not, is there a motion to how we proceed?
I would move to close the written testimony, leave the oral testimony, leave the written testimony open until next Thursday at 5. I think that's the 3rd.
If I may, Commissioner Williams, just to give our staff a little bit of time, maybe do it for 6 days, do it to 5 o'clock on Wednesday, April 2nd. And if I can respectfully, that'd give us a full business day to then
To get the
compile any
packet.
testimony, finalize that deliberative packet for you on the 10th.
So I move to close the oral testimony, leave the written testimony open until 4 p.m. Wednesday, April 2nd, with deliberations to be set for April 10th.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Commissioner Williams, would you like to comment?
This isn't our first planning work plan. What do we want to call it? Planning division work plan. We are getting pretty good at doing these every year, and I think we can move along.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is deliberations on the temporary hardship dwelling text amendment. Nicole.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Nicole Mardell, County Community Development. And today I'm here for deliberations on our text amendment related to temporary hardship dwellings. So just to set the table a bit and kind of give the little bit of background of how we got here. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on March 13th. One public comment was received prior to that public hearing expressing general support. We also received 2 agency comments, one from Redmond Fire, expressing a desire to revisit fire access road requirements for forest zones. They understood that's kind of a separate project from this one. And then we also received a comment from the senior transportation planner noting general compliance with Goal 12 and the transportation planning rule. At the public hearing, you had one member of the public who provided verbal testimony, mostly asking some questions, but expressing kind of general support for some of the amendments. During the open record period, the record was left open until March 19th. We did not receive any additional public or agency comments, but we did receive from Commissioner Altman her recommended clerical edits. Those have been incorporated into an updated draft of the text amendments. And then staff also submitted that Luba case, 21053 that we had mentioned with some highlights of the key points. So that's what's been submitted thus far. Wanted to kind of touch base on that Luba case. If you did read it, it's pretty complex, as you heard from Will. It's a pretty interesting case, one that we don't see very often here in Deschutes County, where there's multiple different types of dwellings. But I just wanted to note some of the key points, because I know we've kind of had some back and forth on this. So again, the key points are that the person suffering the hardship needs to be the existing resident or a relative of the resident. The existing resident who's suffering the hardship or whose relative is suffering the hardship needs to reside in the existing dwelling. The existing resident then has the flexibility to determine how care will be provided. So if the existing resident has a medical condition, a caregiver can reside in a temporary hardship dwelling on the property. Or if a relative of the existing resident has a medical condition, the relative could live in the existing dwelling with the existing resident, and a separate caregiver could live in the temporary hardship dwelling. Or if the relative of the existing resident has a medical condition, that relative could live in the hardship dwelling and receive care actually from the existing resident or a caregiver who comes to the property to deliver that care. So there are kind of several options for this arrangement. But the caregiver generally does not need to be related to the existing resident as well. So those were some of the key findings from that Luba case. It didn't necessarily change, the impact of the proposed amendments, but just wanted to make you aware of that. I also wanted to note that since the close of the record, and it was included in your packet materials, we did find a section of the OAR that speaks to use of an existing building as a temporary hardship dwelling type in the rural residential exception areas. So this is the MUA 10 zone and the RR 10 zone, kind of specific to these amendments. That OAR 660-004-0040 makes it pretty clear that you're only intended to use an RV or a manufactured home as a temporary hardship dwelling type in those zones. So we had originally proposed in our text amendments to expand the allowance for existing buildings, existing buildings from where it's currently allowed in the EFU forest zones to basically any zone that allows for a single family home. But with this OAR, we're restricted for the MUA 10 and RR 10 zone. So instead, you could still, from what we understand, allow it in unincorporated communities, in our rural commercial zone, and in our resort community zone, but it wouldn't be allowed in the MUA 10 or RR 10 zone. So just wanted to make that note since it is a bit different than what we originally presented. We are planning to revise the code to make that clear prior to the board hearing process. But one of the policy options that we'll talk about this evening is whether or not you do want to utilize that staff recommendation to expand the use of existing buildings as a temporary hardship dwelling type outside of the current allowance in the EFU and forest zones. So with that, just wanted to give that background. Are there any questions before we move into deliberations?
Questions?
So a Manu or an RV is still allowed MUA and RR10,
That's correct.
but you can't add a toilet to a shop in MUA or RR10.
Yeah, that would be what we're calling the use of an existing building.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. What's your pleasure?
I was going to say I can share my screen if you would like to walk through the policy options for discussion.
Okay, we can do that.
All right, so I did include these in your hearing packet. We kind of modeled this deliberation process off the process that you had for the RV as rental dwellings. So it's not a full-on matrix, but I hope you can still see that. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit more. All right. So to tee this one up a little bit, one of the first items we thought the planning commission could weigh in on is the existing building piece. So this is kind of a two-parter. So the first part is that the proposed amendments would expand the allowance of an existing building as a hardship dwelling to the following zones. Currently, again, it's allowed in farm and forest. That would be to rural service center, unincorporated community zones, Terrebonne rural community zones, Tumalo rural community zones, the rural commercial zone, and Sun River unincorporated community zones, and then also our resort community zone. So the question for the planning commission, now that we've removed MUI 10 and RR 10 out of that, does the planning commission recommend that the board adopt this expanded allowance of existing buildings as a hardship dwelling type in these zones? Or would you prefer to keep it only in farm and forest? Our staff suggestion is to, allow it, expand that allowance just because it provides a bit more flexibility, which was some of the direction that the board gave us for this project. But if there were concerns from the planning commission, we'd love to hear that. So kind of the kind of responses, if yes, you believe we should adopt that expanded allowance, we can move on to the next item. But if no, we can discuss whether to preserve that current allowance or just expand it to specific zones from that list.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to, yes,
Adopt the recommendation.
adopt the expanded allowance of existing buildings as hardship dwelling type in the above listed zones.
Okay, is there a second?
I would second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Would you like to explain or like to comment?
Yeah, I think that things that we can do to make it easier for people who are taking on a caregiver role or people who need help are good things. And I'm not really concerned about this contributing to anything really largely negative in any way. So that's my logic.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Sorry, you voted opposed?
No,
you
I
just
said aye
voted
to
aye?
approve. I voted aye
Okay,
to.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right. It carries.
Excellent.
Next topic.
So we'll move on to the second piece of the kind of existing building topic. So state regulations currently don't define what an existing building is. So we adopted a local definition back in 2017, which basically said that an existing building is a structure that was in existence on or before March 29th, 2017. And that date was essentially the effective date of the last amendments to this section. So in talking with our coordinated services with building, code enforcement, our permit technicians, we are proposing a rolling eligibility date, again, to allow for more flexibility. So rather than, as of today, requiring you to have a, almost 8-year-old dwelling to qualify for this, this would be essentially a structure that's at least 2 years old. So at the time that you submit your temporary use permit application, your structure needs to have received your final inspection at least 2 years prior. So again, it kind of continuously is a rolling date, so we won't have to revisit it in the future and can expand some of the eligibility. So the question for the Planning Commission is, do you recommend that the board adopt that amended existing building definition as identified by staff? If yes, we can proceed, and if no, we can discuss whether the existing definition is sufficient or if you'd like a different definition instead.
Great. Is there a motion?
I move to amend to adopt the existing building definition.
Do you move to support the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second.
Great. Would you like to? It's been moved and seconded. Would the maker like to comment?
It makes logical sense to have the rolling timeline. Therefore, we don't have to revisit it again. And it also clearly, states that the person who put the existing structure on did not do it to have the hardship structure, that they are modifying an existing structure. So it makes sense to me.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. So moving on to policy choice number 2, this relates to restrictions, again, another two-parter, restrictions on additions and modifications of structures. So the first item, in our current code, we have a restriction on permanent additions to RVs. This is more restrictive than state law, which we're allowed to be, and due to the placement in the Oregon Administrative Rule for this use. So the origin of this restriction was essentially because our building official and our building department wouldn't be able to verify the safety of a permanent addition to an RV. An RV is considered a motor vehicle, so it isn't required to abide by building codes or life safety codes. So if someone were to place a permanent addition, there wouldn't be a way for us to verify that it is a safe addition to that structure. So we previously had it in our code to restrict it, and we're planning to carry that forward. We wanted to bring this to the Planning Commission again, just because this is a slightly more restrictive than state law. So the question for the Planning Commission, do you recommend the board preserve the existing restriction on permanent additions? If yes, we can proceed. If no, we can discuss preferred revisions.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Does anyone
Or-
have a feeling on this?
Or is there, I guess, first question, does anybody have any questions as far as what this means?
I guess my question is, did Deschutes County want to go further than state restrictions just because we're seeing it here? And is it more prevalent? Just why are we going more restrictive than the state?
I think that's a good question, Commissioner. I think, this resulted from some code enforcement cases. I think our building division did see some, or code enforcement division rather, would see some kind of, additions to RVs that were, causing some potential concerns for safety. So this was added to the code, I think even back into maybe the 90s. So it is a pretty old provision. It seems to have been working. We haven't really had any issues with additions. So yeah, our code enforcement and building safety divisions would prefer we keep it in place just to avoid a scenario where someone would try to add on additional living space for an ill family member and end up causing a health risk associated with that situation.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we recommend the Board of County Commissioners preserve the existing restrictions on permanent additions.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Would you like to comment?
I would. I know in the South County, I've seen some very hazardous living conditions in deep forested areas where these RVs have been surrounded, and you're basically trapping yourself in a not easily escapable building and making fire hazards, things like that. So and I move to recommend.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Or excuse me. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm taking some notes for who's making which motions in case we need them later. Maybe Vice Chair Altman's also doing that, but I made the first motion in this deliberations package. Who seconded it? Okay, thank you.
Think.
Yeah. Yep. And then I got Kelsey and Tony, and then I got Tony and Kelsey for the next
Okay.
set. So, okay.
Thank you. I'll try to be more careful at identifying names.
I think that's great if we can remember, but if we can't, we have a backup. So.
Great, thank you. Okay,
All right, the second question under this topic, so staff is proposing a limitation on modification of existing buildings to limit those modifications to the existing building floor area. So this would allow for minor improvements to be made to existing structures. And again, commonly we see things like shops, art studios, sheds, things like that. So allow for installation of things like kitchen facilities or potentially a bathroom or potentially a closet. But it wouldn't allow folks from adding on to the floor area where it could be, you know, essentially a duplex at that point. This suggestion did come from our building division because we have had some cases in the past where essentially a structure is modified so to the point that it's you know, essentially a full second dwelling unit. And when it comes to the time to decommission that, if a hardship is no longer needed, it's a bit more difficult. So this would allow some flexibility for improvements to make it more of a residential friendly space, but avoid it being a permanent full second dwelling on a property. So the question for the Planning Commission, are you supportive of recommending the board adopt the new restriction as identified by staff? If yes, proceed to the next item, or if no, discuss preferred revisions to this item.
Okay, any questions? Okay, is there a motion?
I, Commissioner Kelly, move to proceed with staff's recommendations to adopt the to not allow to expand the, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words right now.
I assume, sounds like you're moving to adopt the recommendation.
Adopt the recommendations, period.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it,
Oh,
just to mix it up a little bit.
Commissioner Kira seconded.
I, Commissioner Curious, second the motion.
All right. Are there any discussions?
Yeah, why I chose to is I see this often in my line of work where people are very disappointed in a real estate transaction because they realize that structure that they assumed was legally permitted, it needs to be discommissioned because it was a hardship case. And I think the nature of this is that it is temporary, and that when you allow excessive modifications, then it, like you said, makes it more permanent in nature and therefore sets people up for disappointment later down the line.
Great. Any other comments? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
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 I,
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right. Our third policy choice, this relates to RV components. So essentially in our code today, we have a variety of requirements for RVs if you're using them as a temporary hardship dwelling. So you need to have right now as it's drafted, a bathroom. We're proposing to clarify that in a toilet. This is the same requirement that came up in the RV as rental dwelling proposal. So making it kind of clear the basic hygienic facilities you would need to have. And then we're proposing to carry over the following additional component requirements that are in our existing code. Those being that the RV needs to comply with all the setbacks of the underlying zone. It needs to be fully licensed, ready for highway use on its wheels or jacking system, and needs to be attached to the site only by quick disconnect type utilities and security devices. And also, if it's located in the special flood hazard area, it needs to comply with our floodplain ordinance. Again, these are going beyond state law, but we've found them to be valuable and just making explicitly clear where an RV can be placed. So folks have, you know, good expectations of where they can site the RV. And again, just the clarity on the bathroom piece is the only minor change because some of these RVs may not have a full shower, but they still have the basic elements of a bathroom. So the question for the Planning Commission, do you recommend the board preserve the existing RV component requirements and adopt the change from bathroom to a sink and toilet? If yes, we can proceed to any additional Planning Commission suggestions, or if no, we discuss preferred revisions to that specific item.
Any questions? If not, is there a motion?
Well, actually, I do have one question. So for bathroom, there was no like definition of bathroom. And we're not really concerned about them having a shower, just a toilet and a sink. And in a lot of RVs, the shower is above the sink. So, okay, that's it.
Okay, is there a motion? Commissioner Karas, did you have?
I'm just letting other people have a chance in case they want to. It's no
Yeah,
pressure.
I. All right, Commissioner Stockamp, I motion to approve the staff recommendation for the adopting the requirement for a sink and toilet.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Karas, second. All right. Is there a discussion?
I guess my only comment is just it makes things safer for those living in it and also for in case of emergency with it being ready for highway use and moving it, it's just safer for everyone in that situation. So it seems like a no-brainer.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you, commissioners. Those are all the items that staff identified for discussion this evening, but if there are any items the planning commission would like to discuss or propose amendments to, staff welcomes that input.
And I would thank you for the very succinct, easy to follow or the way you presented it. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
Commissioner Altkamp, were you able to vote on all items? I heard your yes a few times.
Yes, I voted on everything. All votes were unanimous.
Okay, that's all I was getting at. Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, your display wasn't showing most of the time, so sorry if
Oh,
I
yeah,
missed you.
that's okay. That's okay.
There we go.
There she-
There I am.
So, all right. I think that's all of the agenda items I have. Do we have staff comments? Start with the one sitting here, Nicole.
Mr. Chair, I was hoping that kind of to close the loop on the amendment package that
Oh, certainly.
you get a vote to adopt the amendments as proposed with, as staff mentioned, that change to the MUA 10R10 eligibility for an existing building and move that on to the board.
So
So
you would like a motion to adopt the package of recommendations that we just adopted.
yes.
Hey,
I moved to recommend the package as adopted with the change in the MUA and RR10
Yes, as proposed.
as proposed.
great. Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Karas.
Yes, yeah.
All right. Are there any discussions? Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. It carries. All right. Who would like to go first?
Nicole.
A few
You
updates
volunteered.
prompting, Peter. So, yes, so for the Deschutes County 2040 plan, as I mentioned at our last meeting, we are aiming to have the board reconsideration hearing on April 23rd. We do have a project website up in case you're interested. It's under our deschutes.org/CD under land use hearings, board hearings, and then there's also a short link, which is, if I can load my
Email it
page.
to us.
Yes, I can email it to you. It's bit.ly/Deschutes 2040 reconsideration. So I can send that out to the group. And that includes the petitioner's brief, in case you're interested in what land they brought up. And we'll post hearing information there as well. But as I noted at the last meeting, if you provided public comment, we have over 350 folks on that list. You'll be receiving a notice of that public hearing. Also wanted to note the sage-grouse maps that were being updated by the Land Conservation Development Commission. Those maps were also adopted locally for our combining zone. Those were updated in Dial back in February, so those are active now. As Peter mentioned, the board, as part of that approval, did request an update on the status of sage-grouse habitat and their kind of, population numbers in Deschutes County. So we are bringing a presentation to the board in June with ODFNW's sage grouse coordinator. He works statewide. Skylar Vold is his name, but he's kind of the resident sage grouse expert. And also an ODFNW biologist. I haven't gotten her name yet from Skylar, but she's the one who conducted research in the Brothers Hampton priority area for conservation. So she has kind of that more specific knowledge to Deschutes County. We're aiming to have that in June, so I'll send out info to the Planning Commission once I have kind of the date for that. But it'll be, recorded as all the board meetings are as well. Two other updates. Newberry Country Plan, wanted to note that we have initiated that project, but it's a bit of a slow start just due to my work on the comprehensive plan reconsideration. So we are slightly delayed, but wanted to note that we're holding some outreach activities with 4th and 5th graders. We're going to the Three Rivers School next week, and then also with 7th and 8th graders at the Three Rivers School in 2 weeks. So going to have some activities with their student councils for those grades, and we'll report back. I think that'll be a pretty interesting activity. And then we're kind of keeping updated with some folks who are interested. We're hoping to have more extensive outreach activities this summer and early fall. And then the last update I have, we had told you about urbanization amendments that we received a DLCD grant for. This is in coordination with the City of Bend, looking at an exploratory kind of code project to rework some of our cluster requirements to see if we can make some more incentives to cluster development in a way in a certain radius to UGBs to make urbanization more efficient once lands are brought into city limits. So we're kind of talking with utility providers in the city, asking, what are the key challenges to, urbanizing previously rural land. So that'll be an interesting project. It's kind of like a pilot project. City of Sisters is interested in potentially doing the same thing. But we've been meeting with the utility providers and ODOT and city staff to understand those challenges, and we'll be trying to compile a couple different code option packages and hope to bring that to you potentially, I think, in the fall is what we're aiming for. So that's going on in the background. And those are all my updates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Thanks, commissioners. Just 3 updates for me, just for other items of note. I mentioned the wildfire hazard bills to the extent that you're interested in them. House Bill 3944, Senate Bill 83-4 amendment, and there likely will be more amendments. Senate Bill 687-4 amendment. Those are the 3 bills that are reforming the state's wildfire hazard program in ways that I've already expressed and that you've read about. There's tremendous political pressure and action to revoke the statewide wildfire hazard map and put the opportunities for addressing wildfire permissively at the local level. So we're tracking all 3 of those bills. The bill that's really kind of containing all of those various elements, including the state fire marshal, I think, maybe the state fire marshal, or is it Oregon Department of, I think it's, anyway, one of those 2 is developing, I think it's Department of Forestry, is developing a defensible space model. It's being directed to develop a defensible space model code that's not a requirement, but would be available for local governments to consider. So more to come on that. And I'll keep you updated as we get I think we're a third of the way through the legislative session. So a lot to report on as we get further through the spring. Interesting, very noteworthy plan amendment zone changes scheduled for April 7th. This is the application in Sisters to rezone approximately a 50-acre property next to the high school from forest to a rural residential exception area, taking a Goal 4 exception. So this is being done for multiple reasons, but the biggest one is to try to position the property so it could be evaluated more favorably as part of Sisters' urban growth boundary amendment process. So we don't process a lot of forested rezones. The 3 that we've processed which last time we did that was in the early 2000s, pertain to really public agency. The school district got a goal for exception for a high school. The City of Sisters got a goal for exception and a zone change for their wastewater treatment plant. And then the third one was for the fire protection district for a training center. So that meeting is at 1 o'clock. It'll be recorded. We can keep you posted on that. We're not expecting a decision until May, just given the significant level of public interest in that. Lastly, and if I did this chronologically, I would have done this earlier, but also I mentioned in my earlier remarks for the work plan, next Wednesday, the Board of County Commissioners is going to be conducting a public hearing to consider a rezone application from EFU to an exception area zone for the Bend Park and Recreation District. And that's going to be in the morning on April 2nd. So lots of activity happening, lots of rezoning applications and text amendments and things of that sort. So on the current planning side of our team, on the planning division, they're very, very busy. So those were the three updates I had. Thanks so much for a well-run meeting, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. We appreciate the opportunity to provide all this information. And back to the work plan, while it may not seem like much when we really didn't get much oral testimony, it's an important work plan and provides tremendous direction to staff. So thank you for giving it its rightful consideration. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Tarek, did you have anything? Stephanie?
That's a first.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Altman,
No comments.
Commissioner Williams,
None.
Mr. Stopcamp.
Just quick comment for our next hearing, to have the matrix again, or for like the ranking things. I would love that again for the work plan. That was nice last year, having the kind of like big printout. So
Commissioner Kieras,
Great meeting, very organized.
Commissioner Kelly.
No, great meeting. Nicole, I'm always impressed by how many things you have going on at once. And yeah, I'm just always in awe by how organized you are and clear. So thank you for the matrix and everything tonight.
And I would also like to thank staff for keeping us moving smoothly. And I appreciate everybody's cooperation tonight. And we're done early. Oh, Commissioner Kelly.
And props to, I think, Adam in the back for getting the cameras going.
Yeah.
Hey, he got enough work going to work and serve our needs. Thank you. So with that,